Hi, I'm Greg Johnson, and welcome to Talk with Greg, Conversations in Caregiving. This is a series that we've created here at Emblem Health, and we certainly thank our CEO, Karen Ignani, for her great support of family caregiving. We've created this series so that we will have an archive of our many wonderful friends, because for over 20 years, well, nearly 20 years, Emblem Health has been leading the way in family caregiving, in finding resources, in defining, in looking at methodologies, looking at protocols, and most of all, advancing the awareness and helping all of us to understand that before I can care for you, I've got to care for myself. This is a journey most of us don't go to school to learn. Some of us wake up one morning and the person next to us has had a stroke or some other life-threatening condition. And suddenly we're thrust into a role that we had no idea was going to be part of our journey. And yet that journey can be a blessing. For it teaches us a great many things, and it gives us the opportunity to serve in ways that we never knew we could possibly do it. Over the years, here at Emblem, we have created various organizations. One of the first was the New York City Family Caregiver Coalition. And one of the first persons to be part of that is my guest today, the very noted and very much loved author and lecturer, Sheila Warnock. Welcome home, Sheila.
Thank you, Greg. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, we're so glad to have you here. Sheila has written a book that literally has become the Bible, and I say that respectfully, the Bible of family caregiving. There is so much in that book, and we're going to get back to that. But I want to read from a note I have here, it's in the book as well, her mission statement for Share the Care. Share the Care mission is to improve the quality of life of anyone who needs support and to reduce the stress, depression, isolation, and economic hardship of their caregivers. Now, the website, and we'll be putting that up for you, is www.sharethecare.org. Now, I can take my glasses off. Like so many of us in the world of family caregiving, Share the Care is the result of a caregiving experience extraordinaire. I have been impressed as I travel the world to meet people like Sheila, who have been put in some extraordinarily difficult circumstances and met that challenge, realized what was not available, and when the caregiving experience had concluded, said, how can I help other people? And they've begun wonderful nonprofits just as yours. They have begun wonderful organizations, advocacy groups. And in this series, you're going to have the pleasure of meeting many of these people. Sheila, how did it begin? Can you give us a bit of the story?
Well,
yes.
It's a real long story, but I will try to be brief. Actually, the whole caregiving experience for me started about 1984 when I became my mother's sole caregiver. And also, I was trying to help my best friend, Susan, who had been diagnosed with a rare cancer. And for 4 years, I struggled with my mother's decline and also trying to help my friend every way I could. But I reached a certain point where I had to put my mother in a nursing home, and my friend reached a crisis, and her cancer had come back again several times, but I wasn't allowed to tell anyone. Anyway, she reached a crisis, and it was actually her therapist who said, get your friends together. We'll have a meeting. We'll figure out how we can help you. That was March 1988. And I'll never forget that night because 12 of us showed up. We didn't know each other, but we were all part of Susan's life, and we committed to helping her that night. Also that night, we had a lot of feelings going on because, as you know very well, when you're asked to help someone, a lot of emotions come up. Oh, can I do this? I'm frightened. I'm skeptical. I don't know how I'm going to fit this in my life. But by listening to what was really going on with Susan, everybody heard the same story together. There was no rumor, there was no hearsay. It was very, very moving. And Susan cried, we cried, and then we got to work. And I think the first thing we did was figure out how we were going to help her starting the next day. There were 12 of us. So we thought we'll make 6 teams, meaning 2 people on a team. And those 2 people will find out what Susan needs each week, and they will go to the rest of the group and get the jobs filled, give Susan a schedule of who's coming, when to do what, so she could relax and focus on what was going on with her health.
Yes.
And we started in the next day, and we rotated every week. That did something really important. It took away the responsibility to be put on just 1 or 2 people.
Right.
It was shared. So that was very unusual. Also, it took away one of the hardest things that Susan had to do, and that was continually ask for help.
Exactly. She didn't have to ask. You were asking.
We went to her.
Yes.
And we said, Susan, what can we do for you this week? Well, that was pretty amazing too. And our little group got to work, and we did everything imaginable for 3.5 years. When we began this journey, we were strangers. By the time 3.5 years had gone by, we were known widely as Susan's Funny Family.
Susan's Funny Family.
Yes.
I love that.
Somebody just gave us that name.
I love that.
And I often talk about this whole journey, but the highlight of the journey was about 4 months before Susan passed away. We organized her youngest daughter's wedding, and Susan saved up all her energy, and you know, she was glowing that day, as were the rest of us. And I'll never forget the bride saying to the people at the wedding, I want to thank my parents for making this wedding possible, but I also want to thank all my other mothers who made it happen.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
So it was fantastic.
Every time you say that, I've heard the story, I get teary. That's so great.
But I know you always say that, and I can see it, but thank you. So we had a closing meeting after the memorial, and I remember after the memorial, we went to somebody's apartment for coffee, and this woman came up and she said, "Excuse me, what organization are you with?" And I said, "What are you talking about? We're not an organization, we're her friends, we're Susan's friends." And she couldn't believe that friends would do what we had done. Now, granted, this was like 1991, so it was a long time ago when there was nothing for caregivers.
That's right.
And that could have been it, Greg. It could have been the end of everything, but we were contacted by a woman that our friend Susan had met at cancer care.
Okay.
And Susan talked about her funny family all the time to everyone, telling them what we did and all that sort of stuff. And the woman said, "I'm in a similar circumstance. Like Susan, I'm divorced. I have a young daughter. I have an elderly mother. I have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I am going to have a bone marrow transplant, and they're not going to take care of me. But there are 20 people that want to help me. Do you think I could have a funny family?" So my dear friend Cappy Capicella and I called up the rest of the group, and we had this meeting with these people.
with the new 20
The
people.
new 20 people. And what was so interesting, Greg, and you'll appreciate this, it was like deja vu. They came in and we could see that they were nervous, they were frightened, they were skeptical, they weren't sure what they were getting into. But
They were you
yes,
in the first incarnation.
exactly.
Brilliant.
They didn't say a word, but we could see it in their body language, in their face. But all of us in our funny family talked about how we worked, our 23 forms, our 7 principles. But importantly, we talked about all the wonderful things we got out of it personally.
Yes.
And that's when I saw them all change. You could see them go, oh, we could do this. That's not so hard. And they relaxed, and you could see them gearing up to get going. That next morning, I called up Cappy. Cappy and I worked together in advertising. And I said, Cappy, we have to put this down on paper. Did you see what happened last night? They transformed before our eyes. And also, the room was filled with so much love for Francine. We have to make it easy for other people to do this. So Cappy and I, my dear buddy Cappy Capicella, and I wrote, well, actually there was a book prior to this. This is the 2004. In 1995, the first edition of Share the Care came out. It was published by Simon & Schuster, and there was nothing like it.
Right.
And it started spreading word of mouth. And in fact, Cappy and I were brought to tears when we had been interviewed by the Washington Post, and they did this whole giant article about Share the Care because it was a very new concept at the time. And I saw that article, but a few months later, my sister-in-law sent me a second article from the Washington Post about a woman who had read the first article, had a friend in need, went out and started a Share the Care group for that friend, and most of the people in their group were from a jazzercise class.
Jazzercise.
Jazzercise class. There's a perfect example of where to find people.
Yeah.
And they were putting on a fundraiser to help pay for her medical expenses. Cappy and I were in tears because we knew that what we had written worked. It could happen without us having to teach it. People could pick up the book and do it. And the years passed. You know, we did workshops and we spoke occasionally, but our focus was still advertising.
Yes.
In 2002, something unthinkable happened. Cappy's father, who was 86, but very...
This is your co-author's
My
father.
co-author's father was very spry, totally with it. He was 86 years old, was suddenly diagnosed with a brain tumor. And Cappy was very upset. I'll never forget that because she was searching for the best doctors in the city. She went up to visit her parents, and the next thing I knew, Cappy was in the hospital. She was diagnosed with a brain tumor as well. She and her father both had glioblastoma, grade 4 brain tumors within 2 weeks of each other.
Oh, mercy.
I said, Cappy, don't worry. You live here in the city by yourself. We're getting all your friends together, put together a group. We, at the end, had about 33 people, but about 20 came to the meeting. And we became Cappy's Brain Trust. But Cappy's illness was very fast and very difficult. She had brain surgery, and she lost her ability to speak, to write, to walk, or even move by the end. And she and her father passed away within 12 hours of each other in October of that year.
How ironic.
It was shocking. It was so sad. I can't even begin to tell you. So I made the decision at that time, like, okay, I get it. I know what I'm supposed to be doing. And with $8,000 from my friends, I opened up Share the Caregiving in my living room and got our 501c3, updated Share the Care for a second edition. I added 50 more pages from our work with Cappy, and from talking to groups around the country who were using Share the Care. I incorporated some of their ideas and suggestions into the book, because the book is about how to organize and maintain a group, and it's filled with ideas. It's like creative caregiving.
Exactly. And, well, first of all,
Yes.
bless you for this gift you've given to us. And out of such sadness and such a difficult journey, so much good has come. Because you and Cappy have blessed so many lives, and I know that because I travel the world, and I frequently am asked, "Oh, you're from New York. Do you know Sheila Warnock?" You are more known than you can imagine. But that's the blessing of a very great tragedy and sadness.
It is so ironic that it's so true. People who help one another, who do things like this, who are in this work, as you well
Yes.
know, we are blessed
Amen.
to have the opportunity to help other people. That's the gold for me.
And it's what unites us. As I travel and speak, whether it's Asia or South Africa or Europe, whatever, I see people living the golden rule. While theologies and philosophies and so forth may bring people together, it also can divide them. But you talk about love and you talk about family caregiving, there's a place at the table for each and every one.
Well, you know, you mentioned before about Emblem Health being a forerunner, especially in corporations for 20 years, bringing this to the forefront, which I really am so grateful that they do.
Amen.
Because back then, there was nothing. Today, there's so much for caregivers. So many organizations, books, ideas. But back then, to start pioneering this work was really critical. And I'm very grateful to Emblem Health.
Well, I'm very grateful to Emblem Health as well, because I met you through it. I'll never forget when we first met. She came to tell me her story, and I said, well, I'm a multiple stroke survivor, and I had polio as a child. So I kind of get this one, and I fell in love with the work, and we've been privileged to speak on so many occasions together and to share. But it was Emblem, once again, that brought us together. And also, I want you to know that Sheila is one of the co-chairs of the New York City Partnership for Family Caregiving Corps, which is our...
Very honored.
Well,
But also,
exciting.
I must say that, Greg, I love doing this work with you. When we go out to speak or present or whatever, it's fun. It's a joy. It's very fulfilling.
Yes. I can certainly say it is from my end. We meet the most wonderful people, and we see the most wonderful things being done, because there's a crisis going on.
Absolutely.
And I'm not talking politically, I'm not talking in that way, I'm talking worldwide. We need more caregivers.
Yes, we are going to need so many, because we're not going to have enough health professionals in another 13 years, which is the critical mass for the U.S.
Yes.
Never mind the rest of the world. It's happening all over. When the aging population doubles to 71 million. If we all started today giving 2 hours of our time to help somebody we know
Yes.
who is struggling with caregiving or anything, and it would make all the difference in the world, because in another 13 years it would become a way of life, not just an occasional helping out somebody.
And that's important. You said that when you were telling the story of how, when you started this, you said, how will this fit into my life? Blah, 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 blah. And then, as you found out what you could do, you learned you could say, no, I don't do that sort of thing well. I'm not good at this, but this I can help with. Learning to say no and learning to say yes and incorporating it, suddenly you have more time than you ever had. That is always the case, I find.
Actually, people discover their niche within a group of what they feel comfortable doing, when they can do it, and it sort of becomes routine. It's not like a big deal. It's like, okay, every Saturday or Thursday, I go and help my friend do whatever. It becomes part of your life, and it is so rewarding.
It absolutely is. And then there's something else that I think we all have to do. And now I'm speaking as senior, but it takes me less time to write my Christmas cards these days because the list gets shorter. And that always reminds me, I'm looking at our cameraman, make friends with younger people. In fact, I recently said that to my doctor. You're going to be my doctor for a long time. I want a young man to be my doctor. But we laugh when we say it, but those are things that are important to do.
I believe that everybody should be part of like a Share the Care group or part of any kind of community thing that's helping people. Even little kids, they can go and empty the mailbox. They can feed the dog or walk the dog. Or if we start including children and teenagers, they have some of the most beautiful ways about. I saw this thing on television the other night, or maybe it was Facebook. This child was weeping because the mother was cutting off a fish tail to clean the fish for dinner. And he went into hysterics because he felt so badly for the fish. I mean, that's a very compassionate young
child.
boy.
Yes. No, and it is so important that we include the young people. And one way that I often find, as a minister with families that will come in, I always encourage the whole family to become involved. The children are fabulous at all the technology.
Well, yes.
If you need research done, have them Google things, print them. You have no idea. You and I appreciate. But these young people, it's just second nature to them.
Yes.
But it's also a way of allowing them to give and to serve through the talents which they automatically and so wonderfully have. Now, I wanted, with Share the Care, one of the things that I have found, again and again, I need to put my glasses on to do this portion, but one of the things that I have so loved is that you are filled, and of course when I want to point to it, yes, there are so many forms and charts and scripts, isn't that right?
In order to form a Share the Care group, you need two friends, because it's not a job for the care recipient or the family caregiver to do this work. We wrote this book to two friends or neighbors or whatever the mix is, and those two people have chapters 2 through 9 written specifically to them about the easy steps on how to get going, plus the meeting, which is what bonds a group of people together.
Right, that first meeting that you told.
That's what is the difference between Share the Care and everything else out there, because this is a very heartfelt, specific meeting, but it's scripted. These two people don't have to make up anything. They just can follow the lead of the book. Also, it's about teamwork. So the book has a lot of information and forms for keeping a team working seamlessly. In fact, I even wrote an article for Emblem's Health caregiver website on how you could almost adapt Share the Care in the workplace.
Yes.
If you have a colleague who's going through the caregiving problems here at Emblem Health, you might be able to create a little team of coworkers who can cover certain aspects of their job if they have to be out of the office for a certain amount of time or have an emergency.
And that's so, so important. We talk about that a great deal with the corporate caregiving because that comes to play an enormous, enormous part. I wanted just to have us have a moment. Often when we talk about family caregiving, we tend to think of a situation in which someone is terminal and dying. And that's often very true. And it's not always a senior. In many of the talks we do, we talk about all the faces of family caregiving, that it can be grandparents raising grandchildren, it can be veterans being cared for, it can be the LGBT or people having end of life in the middle of life, it can be long distance caregiving. There are lots of faces. But there are times, and I love some of your examples, and I'd love you have had many, many share the care groups.
I don't even know the exact number. I mean, it's been out there since 1995, but when I hear about groups and clumps of groups and how many times people have been in a group more than once.
Fantastic.
And how many years a group can go on. 6 years, I think, was one of the longest that I knew of. And I've heard of groups that have mobilized 3 and 4 times to help different people. But there was a wonderful example of when Share the Care comes in handy for something that has nothing to do with even illness.
No.
There was a woman in Texas. She was familiar with Share the Care because her daughter had ALS and they had a Share the Care group for her, which enabled this woman to go and keep her job as a teacher. Well, lo and behold, in this little small town in Texas, a young couple moved to town, far from their own families, and they joined the local church. Then the wife, who was pregnant, gave birth to 4 babies, quadruplets. So you can imagine, with no in-laws or, help or friends nearby, new to a community, they were in kind of deep trouble there. But this woman said, oh, I know what we can do. I'll go to my church. I'm going to recruit. She recruited 50 grandmas and grandpas and any other age people that could have the time. And they put together a little book of their pictures and bios. And they went to the family and said, we'd love to help you take care of the babies and, do the bottles and they became the diaper darlings.
The diaper darlings. I love it. I just love that story. What a fabulous use. And when you say this, it also brings me, because I want folks to know this, that you do many, many trainings. I know this personally, but you do many, many trainings for clergy, for faith groups, for healthcare ministries.
Yes, because this works beautifully. In fact, there's a wonderful little church, Presbyterian Church in Forest Hills, with the care crew that I trained back in 2011, who have clocked 5,000 hours in a year of doing good work within their church, but now they're going outside the church to the local nursing home and spending time helping those people in nursing homes who oftentimes have no visitors and nobody to celebrate their birthdays. They go in and make them happy.
Oh, Sheila, there are so many special stories. There was also one that was in Hawaii, I think, where they had to learn to use major equipment.
Yes, that was Peg's Legs. Now, Peg's Legs went on for 6 years. Peggy Chun was a well-known artist on the island of Hawaii. I'm sorry, Honolulu. She was in Honolulu.
Yes.
Okay, I can't remember all the different islands. She was diagnosed with ALS, but she was kind of resistant. This is typical of anybody who is diagnosed with something. Oh, I can take care of myself. I don't need any help, because it hadn't advanced that much. But she fell and broke her leg. Then she was in a wheelchair. So then she decided, okay, now's the time I could use help. Thus the name Peg's Legs. She painted And so she continued to paint until she couldn't paint with her right hand. Then she painted with her left hand, then her mouth. And her ALS started to advance. Well, they had over 100 people. This is because she's so popular to be on her team. And they decided to work in cycle sessions, 3 people on a session during the day. They did fundraising to pay for professionals at night. But the 3 groups during the day, one person within a group of 3 would be trained to operate a Hoyer lift, which is how you move someone, suction someone with ALS, or other protocols that would be needed because they only had the professionals at night, and of course some checking on them. So people volunteered to learn those
tasks.
Yeah, which was
amazing.
They're a phenomenal group, and there is a video about them on my website. So
And give us that website again.
www.sharethecare.org. We're a nonprofit organization. That's what we've got.
Yes, .org, yes. It is incredible, Sheila, all that you have done. And I can't thank you enough for sharing this time with us. Is there anything that I haven't covered or that you haven't that you'd like to share? Because this conversation is, as I've told you, something that we're going to have for archives as well as for people to take a look at. And also, I think, just to be inspired by, because when we hear these wonderful positive stories, that no matter what the difficult, horrendous circumstances, that out of them such wonderful people have come, such great spirit has risen.
Well, they all come away with a great gift. When you give of yourself, you come away with a great gift. Also, it's physically proven that helping others does wonderful things for your body and your mind. It creates chemicals that are beneficial to our own personal health. I would only say that the whole subject of taking care of yourself is something hugely important to any kind of caregiving. And I hope that everybody watching this particular segment will come to the segments that are coming up where we can go into that in great depth. But I want to thank and acknowledge you, Greg, because when I came to the New York City Coalition for Family Caregivers, I didn't know any health professionals at all. Okay, I was just starting my organization. So I am so grateful for people like Greg, who are so generous in spirit and encouraging of people who are just beginning to do this kind of work. Thank you.
Thank you, my darling. I'm going to have to write checks. Darling, thank you so, so much. And thank you, because I know there are people out there who are going to have been inspired by the wonderful work that Sheila and many of our other guests have done. Remember, there's always a place. There's always a need. And I can't think of anyone better to fill it than you. It's wonderful to have you with us today and each time we do a Talk with Greg. I want to thank our production crew. I want to thank Emblem. I want to thank our wonderful CEO. And I especially want to thank our wonderful guest today, Sheila Warnock. Share the care. Folks, take good care of yourself. And most of all, remember, you are not alone.